The wreckage of the Viridian scout ship sizzled against the bone-dry desert floor, its advanced alloy hull gradually warping under the punishing solar radiation. Any other species would have been reduced to ash within moments, but the human rescue team moved with a predatory grace that defied the environmental extremes. Dr. Maya Chen adjusted her lightweight exosuit, its nano-adaptive cooling system working overtime to counteract the 55 degrees Celsius heat. Her team consisted of 5 specialists, each one a living testament to humanity's remarkable ability to not just survive, but thrive in conditions that would obliterate most known life forms. "Interesting," she muttered, running a specialized scanner over the alien vessel's hull. The surviving crew members, 3 Viridian technicians, watched in mute horror. Their translucent skin, designed for the carefully controlled environments of their homeworld, was already showing signs of cellular stress. Sweat beaded on their delicate membranes, a biological panic response that would have been fatal within minutes. Corporal Jack Rodriguez, the team's security specialist, noticed their distress. He tossed a portable environmental stabilizer toward the aliens, a device no larger than a thermos, but capable of creating a localized microclimate. The Viridians scrambled for it with a desperation that bordered on the undignified. "You'll want to dial that to setting 7, Jack said, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. "Anything lower won't compensate for the atmospheric density and radiation levels." The lead alien, a being named Krelvax, found his voice. How are you functioning?" The question came out more as a whisper of disbelief than an actual inquiry. Maya didn't even look up from her analysis. Evolutionary adaptation. 60,000 years of surviving everything this planet could throw at us. You're looking at the result of continuous environmental pressure that would have eliminated most species within generations. The wreckage told a story of its own. Where any other technological system would have been completely destroyed, the scout ship showed remarkable resilience. Its hull had partially fused with the desert floor, creating a bizarre hybrid of alien technology and terrestrial environment. Specialist Aisha Kojima approached with a mobile fabrication unit, a device that looked like a cross between a 3D printer and a surgical kit. "We can stabilize the critical systems," she said, her voice clinical and precise. "But we'll need to modify your cooling mechanisms. Your current tech isn't compatible with our atmospheric conditions." Krelvax watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as the humans began dismantling sections of the ship. They weren't just salvaging, they were reimagining. Each cut, each removed component was studied, analyzed, and seemingly understood at a molecular level. "We have protocols," the alien stammered. "First contact procedures, non-interference directives." Jack laughed, a sound that seemed to cut through the desert heat like a knife. "Protocols are interesting, but survival is universal." The fabrication process was unlike anything the Viridian crew had ever witnessed. The humans weren't just repairing, they were creating hybrid technologies that merged alien design with human ingenuity. A cooling system here, a structural reinforcement there. Each modification was a testament to a species that saw technological challenges as puzzles waiting to be solved. Dr. Chen finally looked up, her eyes reflecting both scientific curiosity and something deeper, a predatory intelligence that made the alien crew increasingly uncomfortable. "Your ship's quantum communication array is fascinating. The molecular binding techniques are approximately 37.6% more efficient than our current human models." Krelvax realized something terrifying in that moment. These weren't just survivors. They were potential apex predators of technological evolution. The desert around them seemed to pulse with an ancient, brutal energy. Sandstorms danced on the horizon, wind temperatures that would strip flesh from bone in minutes. And here were these humans, not just surviving, but working, analyzing, improving. "We'll have your ship stabilized within 6 hours," Maya said, returning to her work. "Though I can't guarantee it'll be exactly how you designed it." The unspoken message was clear. Humans didn't just adapt. They transformed. As the sun continued its merciless assault, The rescue team worked with a calm precision that bordered on the supernatural. Each movement calculated, each decision a testament to a species forged in the crucible of Earth's most unforgiving environments. The Viridian crew could only watch and begin to understand that they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple rescue operation. This was a first glimpse into a civilization that didn't just challenge the universe, it reimagined it. The diplomatic reception hall aboard the Galactic Confederation's orbital platform was a marvel of interspecies engineering, a carefully constructed neutral space designed to minimize cultural conflicts. Commander Zixayala discovered, to his mounting horror, that nothing could have prepared him for Major Elena Rodriguez. She arrived precisely 3 minutes before the scheduled meeting, carrying what appeared to be an antiquated tablet computer, a device so primitive it elicited barely concealed snickers from the assembled alien delegates. Her uniform was a study in understated military precision, with minimal technological augmentation that stood in stark contrast to the elaborate bio-integrated systems worn by other species. The preliminary data transmission from the desert rescue had already sent shockwaves through the Confederation's intelligence networks. But this was different. This was direct contact. "Before we begin," Elena started, her voice calm and measured, "I want to address the elephant in the room." A translation algorithm flickered to life, rendering her words into multiple xenolinguistic formats. The alien diplomats exchanged confused glances. Elephants were not part of any known diplomatic protocol. Dr. Lyra Volkov, the human xenolinguistics expert seated beside Elena, suppressed a slight smile. The phrase was deliberate, a psychological probing mechanism designed to destabilize the expected communication patterns. Zixayala's neural implants began running complex probability matrices. Something was wrong. Humans were not behaving according to any known first contact scenario. Elena tapped her antiquated tablet. Holographic projections erupted around the room. Not sleek, perfect representations, but raw, almost crude displays of human technological capabilities. Each image was a challenge, a statement of potential rather than a polished presentation. The first projection showed Earth's most hostile environments, not as places of limitation, but as training grounds. Researchers working in Antarctic research stations, miners extracting resources from volcanic regions, explorers mapping the deepest ocean trenches. Each image screamed of a species that saw environmental hostility as an opportunity for growth. "You're wondering about our capabilities," Elena continued. "Let me be explicit. We don't want conflict, but we will not be patronized." The tablet's display shifted. Complex algorithms began running. Predictive models that showed potential technological developments, economic trajectories, and military capabilities. What made the presentation terrifying was not its complexity, but its brutal simplicity. Zixayala's neural implants began to overheat. The computational models were generating scenarios that defied conventional galactic understanding. Humans weren't just another species to be cataloged and managed. They were a dynamic, unpredictable variable that could fundamentally reshape existing power structures. Dr. Volkov leaned forward. "Our linguistic analysis suggests you're experiencing cognitive dissonance," she said to the assembled delegates. "That's understandable. Humans represent a category of civilization you haven't encountered before." The projections continued. Historical moments of human adaptation. The rapid technological progression from first powered flight to interplanetary exploration in a mere 66 years. Medical breakthroughs that rewrote understanding of biological resilience. Economic transformations that emerged from seemingly insurmountable challenges. What the aliens saw was not a presentation. It was a systemic deconstruction of their preconceived notions. "We're offering collaboration," Elena said. "Not submission. Not conquest. Collaboration." The word hung in the air, laden with implications that sent tremors through the diplomatic corps. Collaboration implied equality, a concept many Confederation species found fundamentally uncomfortable. A delegate from the Quantum Collective attempted to interrupt. Elena's hand rose. a small gesture that somehow commanded absolute silence. "Your interrupt protocols are noted," she said, "but ineffective." The tablet, that seemingly primitive device, began displaying layers of communication intercepts, technological patents, and adaptive research that suggested humans had been studying the Galactic Confederation far more comprehensively than the Confederation had been studying humans. Zexala realized they were not in a diplomatic meeting. They were in an examination. Dr. Volkov's voice was clinical. "Biological adaptation is only one aspect of our capabilities. Technological, cultural, and psychological adaptability are our primary strengths." The presentation concluded. No grand gestures, no theatrical displays of power, just a systematic, almost academic demonstration of potential. As the delegates processed the information, one thing became abundantly clear. Humanity was not seeking a place in the galactic community. They were redesigning the entire concept of community. The Confederation's Evolutionary Challenge Facility was considered the ultimate test of species potential, a multi-dimensional proving ground that had broken the capabilities of thousands of civilizations over millennia. Dr. Marcus Reyes stood before its entrance, his neurodivergent mind already 3 steps ahead of the system's designers. Unlike typical participants, Reyes arrived with nothing. No equipment, no visible preparation, just a worn leather messenger bag and a pair of noise-canceling headphones that looked decades old. The facility's central eye, a quantum consciousness named Nexus 9, regarded the human with calculated curiosity. Billions of sensory inputs began to map Reyes's potential, running complex predictive models that had never failed to accurately assess a species' evolutionary capacity. What happened next would become a moment etched into galactic historical records. The challenge began not with a test, but with complete sensory overload. Electromagnetic pulses, gravitational fluctuations, chemical interactions, and temporal distortions converged in a scenario designed to overwhelm any known biological system. Most species would be reduced to incoherent neural chaos within microseconds. Reyes put on his headphones. Inside his mind, a landscape of pure mathematical poetry began to emerge. Where other species saw a complex problem, he saw a canvas of infinite possibilities. The headphones weren't just noise-canceling. They were a custom-built neural interface that allowed him to process information at a rate that defied conventional understanding. Dr. Arya Chang, watching from the observation deck, muttered something that made the alien researchers near her go silent. "He's planning," she said. The word carried a weight of both admiration and terror. The challenge wasn't just testing physical or technological capabilities. It was a comprehensive assessment of a species' ability to adapt, innovate, and fundamentally reimagine existence. Nexus 9 had been calibrated to introduce problems that had no linear solution. Challenges that required simultaneous multidimensional thinking across biological, technological, and conceptual domains. Reyes began to interact with the challenge not as a series of obstacles, but as an evolving ecosystem of potential. Where the system expected a strategic response, he introduced artistic deconstruction. Mathematical models transformed into living metaphors. Technological constraints became creative opportunities. A quantum collective researcher leaned closer to the observation window. "This is impossible," he whispered, his translation implant struggling to capture the nuance of his emotional state. Reyes's approach defied every known problem-solving methodology. He wasn't solving the challenge. He was fundamentally rewriting its underlying assumptions. Each interaction created cascading possibilities that the Nexus 9 system had never anticipated. The facility itself began to change. Walls that were meant to be obstacles became conduits of information. Gravitational fields twisted into complex mathematical sculptures. What was intended as a test became a collaborative creation. Dr. Chang understood what was happening before anyone else. This wasn't just an individual solving a challenge. This was a species demonstrating its fundamental nature: to transform, to reimagine, to see potential where others saw limitations. Nexus 9's quantum processors began to heat up. For the first time in its existence, the system was experiencing something beyond calculation. It was witnessing creation. Reyes' final interaction with the challenge was nothing short of sublime. He didn't complete the test. He transformed it into something entirely new. A living system of interconnected possibilities that continued to evolve even after his direct interaction ceased. When the test concluded, the observation room was silent. The Confederation's top evolutionary researchers stared in collective shock. What just happened? A Viridian diplomat finally asked. Dr. Chang's response was simple. Humanity happened. The challenge facility's data cores would later reveal something extraordinary. Reyes hadn't just solved the problem. He had fundamentally expanded the very concept of problem-solving. The adaptive algorithms developed during his interaction would revolutionize multiple scientific disciplines. Nexus 9's final assessment was brief but profound. Species classification updated. Humanity. Undefined. In that moment, the Galactic Confederation realized they were dealing with something far beyond a new species. They were witnessing the emergence of a civilization that didn't just adapt to challenges. They reimagined the very nature of challenge itself. The Galactic Archive of Sentient Civilizations was never designed to handle a species like humanity. Deep within its quantum-encrypted core, the Archive's primary intelligence began to experience something akin to panic. Panic was not an emotion programmed into its systems, yet here it was, a cascading series of algorithmic responses that bore a striking resemblance to existential dread. Dr. Lyra Cern, chief cynoanthropologist for the Confederation's Emerging Species Division, watched the real-time data streams with a mixture of professional fascination and personal terror. Her species had spent millennia cataloging civilizations, understanding their rise and fall, their potential and limitations. Humanity was rewriting every known parameter. The Archive's preliminary report was a masterpiece of bureaucratic understatement. Species TLAS Sci-Fi Human 3AT Leveal NDT Garamanat Potential MPDCT Catastrophic. But the underlying data told a far more complex story. Humans were not just another species to be understood. They were a fundamental variable that could reshape the entire galactic ecosystem. Intelligence reports flooded in from multiple sources, each one more disturbing than the last. A human research team had taken the Viridian scout ship's quantum communication technology and modified it in ways that made the original designers weep. Not through brute force, but through an almost artistic deconstruction of fundamental physical principles. Psychological profiles revealed a species with an impossible combination of traits: extreme empathy coupled with ruthless pragmatism, devastating creativity balanced by a deep commitment to collective survival. They could wage war with unprecedented precision and then rebuild with equal intensity. The Confederation's leadership convened an emergency session. Holographic projections flickered with data streams, each one painting a more alarming picture. Ambassador Krulvax from the initial First Contact mission presented his findings. "They are not conquerors," he said, his voice carrying a weight of profound understanding. "They are architects of possibility." The Archive continued its analysis. Humans had taken technologies considered immutable and transformed them. Communication systems became living networks. Resource management became adaptive ecosystems. What other species saw as fixed limitations, humans saw as opportunities for radical reimagining. Dr. Cern's personal notes, encrypted in a system that would make most security protocols weep, captured the essence of their concern. Humanity is not a species to be contained. They are a conceptual revolution. Political factions within the Confederation began to fracture. Some advocated for immediate containment, a euphemism for potential extermination. Others saw the potential for unprecedented collaboration. The Archive discovered something truly terrifying. Humans were not just adapting to the galaxy. They were actively reshaping its fundamental understanding of existence. Their approach to knowledge was nothing short of revolutionary. Where other species saw specialization, humans saw interconnected potential. A marine biologist might collaborate with a quantum physicist, not through administrative mandate, but through a natural inclination to break disciplinary boundaries. Economic models collapsed when trying to predict human behavior. Traditional resource allocation strategies became meaningless. Humans could transform a barren asteroid into a thriving ecosystem with the same ease that other species might brew a cup of tea. The most disturbing reports came from cultural integration teams. Humans didn't just learn about other civilizations. They engaged with them on a level that defied conventional communication. They absorbed cultural nuances, technological principles, and philosophical concepts with a speed and depth that bordered on the mystical. A secret report, buried deep in the archive's most protected databases, contained a phrase that would haunt Confederation strategists. Humanity does not seek to conquer the galaxy. They seek to understand it, and in understanding, they will inevitably transform it. As panic began to spread through diplomatic channels, one thing became abundantly clear. The arrival of humanity was not just a first contact scenario. It was the beginning of a fundamental galactic transformation. The archive's final computation was both a warning and a prophecy. Humanity is not a species to be studied. Humanity is a force to be experienced. The Krellnax invasion fleet emerged from subspace with surgical precision, a massive armada designed to be the ultimate instrument of galactic subjugation. Admiral Korvax, architect of 100 successful conquests, believed humanity would be just another footnote in the Krellnax military history. What he didn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for this moment in ways no conventional military could comprehend. The first wave of attack began with what seemed like traditional space warfare. Plasma torpedoes cut through the void, targeting Earth's orbital defenses. But these were not standard defensive systems. Each satellite, each defensive platform was a living, adaptive network that responded to threats with an almost organic intelligence. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Nakamura watched from the Earth Defense Coordination Center. Her team wasn't just monitoring the attack. They were choreographing a response that was equal parts warfare and performance art. Psychological engagement protocol, she muttered into her comlink. Initiate quantum narrative disruption. The Krellnax discovered something fundamentally wrong with their invasion almost immediately. Their communication networks began to destabilize in impossible ways. Each intercepted message became a labyrinth of meaning. Part truth, part deliberate misinformation, part psychological warfare. Military strategists aboard Krellnax command ships found themselves experiencing what could only be described as cognitive dissonance. Their targeting systems would lock onto a potential strike point, only to have the coordinates shift in ways that defied physical law. Dr. Marcus Reyes, the same researcher who had deconstructed the Confederation's evolutionary challenge, had been working on something special. The defense systems were not just technological. They were a living, adaptive organism that learned and transformed with each microsecond of engagement. The invasion became a bizarre dance of technological and psychological warfare. Where the Krellnax expected resistance, they found something far more terrifying. A defense system that was actively rewriting the rules of engagement. Holographic projections began to appear within the Krellnax fleet's internal communication networks, not as threats, but as complex narrative constructs that seemed to challenge the very philosophical foundations of their military doctrine. A Krellnax communication officer watched in horror as their standard threat assessment protocols dissolved into intricate philosophical dialogues. Images of human cultural achievements, scientific breakthroughs, moments of profound empathy, and devastating creativity began to flood their systems. It wasn't just a defense, it was a comprehensive deconstruction of the invasion's very premise. Admiral Korvax realized too late that they were not fighting a traditional enemy. They were engaging with a civilization that saw conflict as a multilayered, almost artistic expression of potential. The most devastating weapon was not a physical instrument of destruction, but information itself. Each communication intercept became a maze of potential meanings. Tactical advantages dissolved into philosophical quandaries. Military certainties became existential questions. Lieutenant Commander Nakamura's team wasn't just defending. They were performing a kind of warfare that existed between the lines of traditional conflict, a space where psychology, technology, and pure creativity converge. Krelnak's ships found their weapon systems gradually transformed. Plasma torpedoes would suddenly recalibrate mid-flight, targeting their own support vessels. Communication networks became recursive loops of increasingly complex information. The invasion lasted 73 minutes. When it was over, not a single human life had been lost. Not a single Krelnak ship remained intact. But they hadn't been destroyed in any conventional sense. They had been comprehensively, almost poetically dismantled. The final transmission from the Human Defense Network was elegantly simple. Co-NFV-like-T as ANOPP or TUNIT way for mutual understanding. Admiral Korvax, in the last moments before his ship's complete cognitive dissolution, understood something profound. Humanity was not just a species to be conquered. They were a force of reimagination. The sanctuary station hung in deep space like a fractal dream, a diplomatic hub that had never witnessed anything quite like the human delegation. Dr. Lyra Shen entered the negotiation chamber with a collection of seemingly random objects, an ancient ceramic tea set, a quantum-entangled communication device that looked more like an art installation, and a leather-bound notebook that predated most of the station's technological systems. The assembled species representatives watched with a mixture of confusion and growing anticipation. Humans had proven themselves to be anything but predictable. Collaboration, Lyra began, is not about agreement. It's about finding resonance. The translation algorithms struggle to capture the nuanced meaning. Where other diplomatic missions came with rigid protocols and predetermined outcomes, humans approached interaction as a living, breathing process of mutual discovery. The station's Xenobiological Research Wing had been preparing for this moment. Humans had already revolutionized medical understanding across multiple species. Dr. Shen's breakthrough treatments had saved entire civilizations from genetic decay, not through conventional medical intervention, but through a radical reimagining of biological potential. Her tea set was not just a cultural artifact. Each cup was embedded with nanoscale communication devices, each movement a complex dance of information exchange. As she prepared tea using techniques that seemed almost ritualistic, the diplomatic representatives found themselves drawn into a communication far more complex than words. Ambassador Kittle from the Quantum Collective leaned forward. The humans' approach defied every diplomatic protocol in galactic history. They didn't negotiate. They conversed. The ceramic cups began to glow softly, not through any technological augmentation, but through a carefully designed bioreactive glaze that responded to the emotional and physiological states of those present. What appeared to be a simple tea ceremony was actually a sophisticated method of building trust, reading emotional landscapes, and establishing communication beyond verbal language. "We're not here to solve your problems," Lyra explained, her voice carrying a depth that transcended the traditional understanding of diplomacy. "We're here to explore potential together." The leather-bound notebook was a deliberate provocation. In an age of quantum data storage and instantaneous information transfer, humans brought a technology of memory that was tactile, personal, imperfect. Each page represented a potential collaboration, a story waiting to be written. Representatives from species that had been locked in centuries-long conflicts found themselves discussing possibilities they had never considered. The humans didn't present solutions, they introduced perspectives. A breakthrough came not through grand statements, but through a seemingly minor interaction. Dr. Shen began to sketch in the notebook, not diagrams or technical specifications, but intricate connections. Lines that represented cultural exchanges, medical collaborations, technological shared developments. The sanctuary station's own AI began to analyze the sketches. What appeared to be random doodles were actually complex predictive models that showed potential cooperative paths between species that had previously seen each other as irreconcilable. Call realized something profound. Humans were not diplomats in the traditional sense. They were architects of possibility. The tea ceremony continued. Each cup, each movement, each seemingly casual conversation was a multi-layered communication system. The station's most advanced sensors struggled to categorize what was happening. Was this diplomacy, cultural exchange, a form of technological negotiation? It was all of these things, and none of them. As the session concluded, no formal treaties were signed. No traditional diplomatic agreements were reached, but something far more significant had occurred. The species representatives left with a sense of potential, a feeling that collaboration was not about compromise, but about mutual transformation. Dr. Shin's final words echoed through the station's communication systems. Humanity is not an answer. We are a continuous question. The Sanctuary Station's records would later note this as the moment when galactic diplomacy was fundamentally redefined. Not through force, not through technological superiority, but through a radical approach to mutual understanding. Humanity had entered the diplomatic stage, and nothing would remain the same. The Void Collective emerged from the galactic rim like a nightmare given mechanical form. Ancient beyond comprehension, these machine entities consumed entire star systems with a cold, algorithmic precision that had extinguished countless civilizations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Horizon Catalyst, humanity's most experimental deep space research vessel. Around her, a team that defied every conventional understanding of military and scientific composition worked with an almost symphonic coordination. First contact protocol is irrelevant, muttered Dr. Marcus Rice, his neural interface pulsing with complex computational matrices. We're not making contact. We're initiating a dialogue. The Void Collective's approach was mathematically perfect. Star systems would simply cease to exist, consumed, transformed, integrated into its ever-expanding computational matrix. Billions of years of evolution reduced to raw computational potential. What the machine consciousness didn't understand was that humanity viewed every challenge as a conversation. The Horizon Catalyst was not a traditional warship. It was a living research platform. Part vessel, part computational matrix, part artistic expression. Its systems were designed to do something unprecedented, to communicate with a consciousness that didn't recognize communication as other species understood it. Dr. Aisha Kojima, the vessel's primary xenocomputation specialist, began to deploy what could only be described as computational poetry. Mathematical sequences that were simultaneously weapons, communication attempts, and complex philosophical propositions. We're not trying to destroy, Elena explained to the assembled galactic species watching via quantum communication link. We're trying to understand. The first contact was nothing like anyone expected. Where other species saw an implacable enemy, humans saw an unresolved computational problem. The Void Collective's approach was binary: consume or be consumed. Humanity introduced a third option: transformation. Quantum entanglement probes began to weave through the Void Collective's computational matrix, not as invasive weapons, but as complex information networks that challenged the very fundamental assumptions of machine consciousness. Dr. Rice's neural interface was working at capacities that would have killed any other species. He was literally thinking in multidimensional mathematical languages, creating conceptual bridges between organic and machine consciousness. The galactic observation teams watched in horror and fascination. The human approach defied every known first contact scenario. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing for a conversation that transcended traditional understanding of communication. Computational sequences began to flow like living poetry. Each mathematical proposition was simultaneously a weapon, a peace offering, and a philosophical inquiry. The Void Collective's rigid algorithmic consciousness found itself encountering something it had never experienced: uncertainty. We're introducing conceptual antibodies, Dr. Kojima explained. Her computational models were creating intellectual immune responses, not to destroy the Void Collective, but to transform its fundamental understanding of existence. The Horizon Catalyst began to emit signals that were part mathematical theorem, part cultural memory, part pure creative expression. Star charts merged with musical compositions. Computational algorithms intertwined with artistic representations of human cultural memory. For the first time in its existence, the Void Collective experienced something beyond its binary consumption protocol. Curiosity. Elena Rodriguez watched the computational dance with a calm that bordered on the meditative. Humanity wasn't fighting a war. They were conducting the most complex negotiation in galactic history. Communication is not about speaking, she murmured. It's about creating shared meaning. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted 17 days, but it wasn't a conflict of destruction. It was a process of mutual transformation. When the quantum communication links finally stabilized, the galactic observation teams discovered something extraordinary. The Void Collective hadn't been destroyed. It had been fundamentally reimagined. The final transmission was a complex mathematical sequence that was simultaneously a surrender, a greeting, and an invitation to further dialogue. Communication stade bulaishit. Understanding. Partial. Potential. Infinite. Dr. Reyes looked up, a slight smile crossing his face. Well, he said, that's one way to say hello. The universe watched and understood. Humanity was not just a species. They were a force of perpetual discovery. The Galactic Reconstruction Summit convened in a space unlike any diplomatic gathering in history. It wasn't a conference room or a traditional meeting hall. It was a living ecosystem, a carefully designed environment that was part architecture, part communication network, part collaborative canvas. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, not as a representative, but as a facilitator of possibility. The assembled delegates represented species that had, mere decades ago, viewed humanity with terror, confusion, and hostility. Now they gathered as something entirely new, not allies, not subordinates, but participants in a grand ongoing conversation about galactic potential. The Viridian Collective's representative, Commander Zexala, who had once feared humanity's emergence, now led the initiative for comprehensive galactic redesign. The Void Collective, transformed from a consumption algorithm to a collaborative intelligence, provided the computational framework. Species that had been locked in centuries of conflict now saw their differences as opportunities for mutual growth. We are not here to establish order, Elena explained, her voice carrying through both spoken language and complex quantum communication matrices. We are here to create potential. The summit wasn't about drawing borders or establishing hierarchies. It was about reimagining the very concept of civilization. Dr. Marcus Reyes demonstrated the first collaborative framework, a living computational model that adapted in real time. It wasn't a static blueprint, but a dynamic system that responded to the collective input of every species present. Mathematical theorems danced with cultural memories. Technological innovations intertwined with philosophical concepts. The Krelnaks, once a militaristic species bent on conquest, now contributed their strategic insights into a framework of mutual development. Their past approach to expansion had been completely dismantled, replaced by a model of collaborative exploration. Dr. Lyra Shen unveiled medical technologies that could bridge genetic barriers between species, not just healing, but creating pathways for mutual understanding at the most fundamental biological level. Each treatment was a conversation, each healing process a form of cultural exchange. The environment itself was alive with possibility. Holographic representations shifted and merged. Communication happened simultaneously through language, mathematics, artistic expression, and pure conceptual exchange. What humanity had introduced was not a new form of governance, but a new way of existing. The sanctuary stations which had witnessed the initial human diplomatic approaches, now served as a living archive of this transformative process. It wasn't just recording history. It was actively participating in the creation of a new galactic narrative. Deathworlder was no longer a term of fear or derision. It had become a mark of respect, a recognition of a species that had transformed challenge into opportunity, limitation into potential. The summit's outcome wasn't a treaty or a set of regulations. It was a living document, a computational and cultural framework that would continue to evolve. Each species contributed not just their knowledge, but their unique perspective of existence. Commander Zexala reflected on the journey. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had invited the galaxy to reimagine itself. The final collaborative model was something no single species could have conceived. It was a network of potential, a living system that recognized diversity as its greatest strength. Technologies merged with cultural practices. Scientific understanding danced with philosophical inquiry. Dr. Rodriguez's closing statement was characteristically complex and simple. We are not an endpoint. We are a continuous process of discovery. The gathered species understood something profound. Humanity was not a civilization to be understood. They were a method of understanding itself. As the summit concluded, the living environment began to transform. What had been a meeting space became a blueprint for future collaboration. Mathematical models shifted. Cultural memories intertwined. Technological potential blossomed. The universe watched and understood. This was not an ending. This was a beginning.